Joseph Kuria Irungu alias Jowie. Shall suffer death as provided for the offense of murder,
Joseph Irungu alias Jowie asked the court for mercy.
We are gathered here today
For a lenient sentence. He said he was the first offender and acknowledged how brutal the murder was, bordering what he acknowledged as absolute madness. The less he said, the better, acknowledging yet again that nothing will change even if he did. In the end, he asked the court for a custodial sentence. Loudly, Justice Grace Nzioka wondered why the defense did not go for a non-custodial sentence. Jowie, perhaps having read the mood of the judgment rendered weeks ago, asked to be jailed. He wanted life. The judge gave him death.
the manner in which the offense was committed did not at any time intend to give the deceased one more minute to live.
The right of life must be discussed in the context of both the suspect and the victim, the judge said. According to the court, Jowie never spared Monica Kimani. She was not given an extra minute to live. The scene looked like a slaughterhouse. Skilled hands had committed the ultimate crime, depriving someone of their life illegally. When the sentencing began, Jowie elected to stand on his feet, even when he was given the option to sit. And he did throughout the reading. Occasionally, he looked at the judge. Most of the time, his head hung on his shoulder. This burden he must carry was too heavy. His family, mother, father, and 3 sisters have been his strongest pillars. They sat throughout his trial for close to 6 years. His friends nowhere to be seen.
Na hajafanya kazi yoyote, kosa yoyote, hajaua. Kuna kitu ninaamini, kuna a God of a second chance. Na atamtoa.
In her judgment, Justice Grace Nzioki noted that the probation officer's report was indicting. He was described as aggressive, antisocial, and with double personality. The guards at his residential place said he never consented to being searched. He claimed he worked at State House and brandished a gun. These factors, the court held, were crucial in determining if Jowie was a person to be released back to the society or not. Jowie's die was cast. At only 28 years of age, Monique's, as she was called by the family and friends, was already living the life. She was the managing director of the family business, Millipol General Trading in South Sudan, and in the last 7 years she lived abroad. She commuted regularly between Kenya and South Sudan. On this trip, she intended a short stay. Later, she was headed to Dubai. Joseph Irungu and Monica's brother, George Kimani, were in school together back in 2012. They, however, lost touch and only reunited later in life when George learned Monica and Jowie were friends. On the 20th of September 2018, Monica's body was discovered in a bathtub. Her hands and legs were bound tightly with a white cable. There was a knife next to the body. It was the suspected murder weapon. Her throat was slit and the television live in the living room. She had no clothes on except her underwear, which was torn on one side, an image no family member wants to contend with. This is not the Monica they knew, lifeless with only clues here and there, as to what may have happened to her. She had a very strong personality and was the manager of a business that supported the whole family. It collapsed with her demise.
The business collapsed. The family became drained financially, and they were not able to meet their day-to-day needs, as that was the main source of their income.
Monica had been living in South Sudan for 7 years. The family described her as hardworking, focused, and determined individual with a lot of respect for them. She was successful, and just before she was killed, had bought a car for her mother. The family said she burnt the midnight oil to support them. Monica was not married, but had a boyfriend. The family identified him as Yasser Mohammed. At the time of the murder, Mohammed was not in the country, but he attended the burial. Monica Kimani was killed 3 weeks shy of her 29th birthday. She intended to marry her fiancé, Yasser Mohammed. The garden and theme colors for her birthday were already picked out. Using a stolen identity card, Joseph Irungu masked his identity, successfully hoodwinking the security guards at Lamuria Garden apartment located in Kilimani, who then allowed him access to an apartment rented by Monica Kimani just 3 months earlier. On the fateful night at around 8 p.m., a man dressed in a white kanzu, a grey jacket, and a maroon baseball cap checked in at Monica's apartment. Earlier, he had registered at the gate as Harun Dominic Becerra. This was later established as a stolen identity. The courts used this to establish the murder was well calculated and planned beforehand with the intention to conceal evidence eventually. The CCTV cameras were also switched off. Close to 4 hours later, that's around 11:30 p.m., the Harun Dominic Becerra left the apartment. Born and bred in Gucha Estate, Nakuru County, 33-year-old Joseph Kuria Irungu was brought up in a Christian family. Those who know him describe him as very social, a committed Christian, and harmless. Trained in food and beverage management, Jowie's love for guns is not in doubt. He was a security consultant, worked in the United Arab Emirates and Middle East, and occasionally held contracts at home, where he was a personal security detail for many politicians. When he came back home, he intended to establish a security firm together with a friend.
As a social, overly generous, respectful to authority, committed Christian, and he believes in innocence, although he believes in his innocence, although he has painfully accepted the conviction.
He did his Kenya Certificate of Secondary Education examination back in 2010. Later, he joined the Kenya Polytechnic, where he obtained a diploma in food and beverage management. Jowie would then leave for Dubai, where he obtained paramilitary training. His social media pages are awash with pictures donning military fatigues and holding semi-automatic weapons. He was licensed to carry weapons and offer private close protection. To the authority, Jowie was a different person. He is described by the investigations officer Maxwell Otieno as extremely dangerous person and violent in nature. During the trial period, George Kimani, Monica's brother, told the court that at one point, Jowie blocked his car. He was also said to have been involved in a violent altercation at a nightclub when he was out on bail. To the court, Jowie possessed the required knowledge and skill to subdue and kill Monica. Her killing was said to have been carried out by a professional. 19th of September at 6:21 p.m., Monica Kimani placed a call to her brother George Kimani announcing her arrival from Juba, South Sudan. An hour later, at about 7:30 p.m., a taxi drops off Monica at the Lamuria Garden apartment in Kilimani. She pays the driver, who then leaves. Sometime later, Monica leaves her apartment to pick up a delivery from the gate. She would later receive 4 visitors. 8 p.m., a man dressed in a white kanzu, grey jacket, and a maroon baseball cap paid her a visit. He drove in a taxi. When he was asked by the guards at the gate to identify himself, he gave them the identity of one Dominic Harun Bisera. He asks to be allowed to go to Monica's house, and Monica was called and she granted that request. 9:15 p.m., one Lee Owen pays her a visit to deliver some documents. He told the court he found Monica in the company of 2 men, including a neighbor, one Mr. Walid, who lived in apartment number A9, and Joe, a security officer attached to Interpol and the office of the president. This is how Jowie was introduced. Anthony Kariuki Kaka was the other visitor. He did not, however, gain access to the house as Monica opted to meet him at the parking area, telling him she had a visitor in the house from State House. Lee Owen told the court that Walid was the first to leave before he left at around 10 p.m., leaving Joy and Monica alone in the house. At 11:21 p.m., Harun Dominic Bisera, who had been cleared at 8 p.m. by the guards at the gate, also left the house, and after that, the guards told the court that there was no one else who gained access to the house. The following day, having failed to reach his sister on phone, George Kimani decided to visit the apartment number A8 at around 11:30. With him was the girlfriend. At noon, George Kimani, with the help of the caretaker and the gardener, used a ladder to gain entry into the apartment number 8, where they discovered Monica's body. Her throat was slit and the water was running in the bathtub while the television was still on. Later, the police were called in from the Directorate of Criminal Investigation, Homicide Section. They concluded their investigations at the crime scene and took away the body to Chiromo mortuary.
The post-mortem report produced by Dr. Peter Ndegwa confirmed that the deceased Monica Nyawira Kimani died due to severe neck injuries due to a sharp force.
This is a crucial timeline and event that eventually the prosecution would use together with witness testimonies, the crime scene investigations, to nail Jowie, who claims it's all circumstantial. 35 witnesses in total were lined up by the prosecution to testify, and it all began with contradictory accounts and inconsistencies in a shooting incident that was reported at the Langata police station. The items that were instrumental in reaching this judgment included the identification parade, where 3 people are said to have positively identified the suspect. Number 1, Joseph Irungu, as the person who was in Monica Kimani's apartment number A8. Clothes worn by Jowie on the material day, the stolen identity card belonging to one Harun Dominic Bisera, the destruction of evidence in form of clothing, and the gun used in inflicting a wound on the suspect to possibly divert the attention of the investigators. The prosecution meticulously built their case working backward from the known to the unknown on the following. 1. The identity card stolen and used to access the apartment of the victim before she was murdered. The protected witness, including the guard, who was also key in producing the evidence. The court was also told the convict had carried extra clothes he changed into, committed the crime, and changed back to the other clothes. Only the pair of shorts worn was found. Also, the prosecution told the court that the convict armed himself with a gun to use in intimidating and subduing the victim and coercing her to submission, and that the convict went ahead after committing the crime to destroy clothes that could have been used as evidence. Later, he shot himself in the arm. to divert the attention of the investigators from looking into the murder case to focus on the shooting incident. They told the court that the evidence that Jowie did not know the victim personally is insincere and produced call data that spoke to their relationship. The convict had asked the court to find that he had no motive to kill the victim. However, the family told the court that motive here was irrelevant for the purpose of proof of murder. In their case, the defense told the court that the production of the pair of shots was hot air, as clothes were generic, and that nothing could identify them specifically out of any clothes of the same kind. They also alleged that there was a lot of contradictions in the prosecution's witness testimonies, including time when Aaron Dominic entered the compound and left. It was said he accessed the house at 8 p.m, while the documented time was 11 p.m, giving him a period of only 10 minutes in the house, which he said was not sufficient to commit the crime and leave. On the stolen identity, the defense told the court that the person who the court is invited to deem as the first accused is actually Aaron Dominic Bisera and not Joseph Kuria Irungu, and that other witnesses didn't speak to a bag which he is said to have used to carry a kanzu, which was never found by the investigators. The convict also told the court that he did not personally know the deceased, hence questioned how he would have known of her return from Juba, South Sudan. In his defense, he produced his identity card to show it was different from that of one Aaron Dominic Bisera, who was the one cleared by the guards at Lemuria Garden apartment to enter Monica's house. Jowie will then attempt to shift the spotlight to the slain woman's boyfriend, Yasser Mohammed, telling the court because of a text message saying, "Kuja unisaidie kulala," translated as "come help me sleep," alleging that if it got to him, he would have been angry, infuriated, and even annoyed. He could have committed the crime. The two unknown male DNA found in the strapping used to tie the victim was also questioned and mentioned as possible criminals. The allegation from Brian Kasaine over the request for paraffin at 2 a.m. to burn some items was also dismissed by the defense as untrue, and that the pair of shots produced by the prosecution with bloodstains of the victim is not the same shot that the police collected from the suspect's house, and that his had no blood stains. On the identification parade, the convict told the court that the whole process was flawed and that no other person was subjected to the parade. Further, the defense alleged an intention by the investigators to fix the suspect, mentioning the impounding of a wrong motor vehicle in the quest to implicate him. The convict had mentioned meeting his friend Jennings, who was said to have driven the second accused's car. This was also impeached as untrue, since Jennings had his own car on that day. In a futile attempt, the defense also attempted to shift focus to the victim's boyfriend, alleging no adequate investigations were conducted to determine if Yasser Mohammed was actually in the country at the time the murder was committed. The court, however, determined that he indeed knew the deceased Monica Kimani prior to her death, that he stole and used the stolen identity card to access the Lemuria Garden apartment, that the clothes he was wearing also implicated him in the commission of the offense. He was indeed in the deceased's house on the 19th of September and was the last person with the deceased, that he had a gun that night that was used to subdue the deceased. He was also positively identified in the parade. In summary, the prosecution indeed provided adequate evidence to the court that Jowie Irungu indeed committed the murder according to the evidence. So, it was 3 hours, 30 minutes of interaction at the Lemuria Garden apartment, house number A8. 50 photographs were taken by the investigators as evidence. Jowie Irungu spent 18 months in remand. He was granted a bail of 2 million shillings. 35 witnesses were listed by the prosecution as witnesses. 2 judges sat on the case. 5 years of trial. And of course, this has been one of Kenya's most followed up case. Joseph Irungu, a very self-aware and stylish young man with a taste for good things, and Jackie Maribe, a disgraced TV queen who got off a case that would have changed her life forever. The charge was murder. The verdict, guilty as charged. The punishment, death. Joseph Irungu is set to appeal. Ken Mijungu, KTN News.